Picture this. It's late 2008, and we're in a cramped, messy apartment in San Francisco. You've got two founders, Brian Chesky and Gebbia, hunched over a kitchen table that is just completely covered in cardboard, glue, and these cutout cartoon faces of presidential candidates. Now, they aren't writing code, and they definitely aren't pitching venture capitalists in some fancy boardroom. No, they are literally hand-gluing novelty cereal boxes together at midnight. Why? Because their company is completely out of cash, every single investor has told them no, and this absurd little craft project is literally their only plan to keep the lights on.
Brian Chesky would actually coin a phrase later on to describe this exact desperate stretch of time. He called it the trough of sorrow. You know, it's not that glamorous launch day everyone dreams of, and it's definitely not a triumphant funding round. The trough is the raw, unglamorous reality of trying to build a company when absolutely everyone is telling you your idea is a bust. It's that brutal phase where you're running entirely on fumes and you have to dig incredibly deep just to survive one more week.
And to survive their trough, they hand-assembled these limited edition cereal boxes. They called them Obama O's, The Breakfast of Change, and Captain McCain's. The whole strategy was just hoping strangers would pay $40 a pop for a joke about breakfast cereal. I mean, it sounds completely laughable, right? But they had to do it. Selling cardboard boxes was, no joke, the only thing standing between them and shutting the company down forever.
Part 1. A simple rent solution. So how did they even get into that glue-covered mess in the first place? Let's rewind a bit.
Let's go back a year to August 2007. Chesky and Gebbia are just two roommates in San Francisco, dealing with a very normal, very mundane problem. They can't make rent. They don't have some grand vision for a global hospitality empire at this point. What they do have is a massive design conference rolling into town, completely sold-out hotels everywhere, and a rent check that's due. So they execute this embarrassingly simple three-step plan. Step 1, drag 3 air mattresses out onto the living room floor. Step 2, offer conference attendees a place to crash plus breakfast. And Step 3, charge $80 a night. It wasn't a business plan, really. It was literally just a way to avoid getting evicted. But then, the unthinkable happened. 3 complete strangers actually booked it. They showed up, slept on the air mattresses, ate the breakfast, and handed over the cash. And that was the spark. It was just 2 roommates realizing that a problem they had was actually a problem other people had too. So realizing they might be onto something big, they brought in Chesky's former roommate, a brilliant engineer named Nathan Blecharczyk, to build a functioning website for this little concept they dubbed Air, Bed, and Breakfast. But as you might guess, they hit a brick wall almost immediately. When they took this idea to investors and mentors, they were met with just absolute, flat-out rejection. The core premise of strangers paying to sleep in other strangers' homes just sounded completely absurd to most people back then. And nothing illustrates this early friction better than when Paul Graham, the legendary co-founder of the startup accelerator Y Combinator, told the founders flatly that their idea was, quote, terrible. I want you to just sit with that for a second. Imagine hearing that devastating one-word feedback from literally one of the most respected voices in all of Silicon Valley. What would you do the very next morning? By 2008, the company is floundering, money is gone, and industry experts are actively telling them it's a terrible idea that will never work. At that point, you have to decide. Are you going to pack it up and go home? Or are you going to keep going anyway?
Well, they chose to keep going. Section 2. The turning point.
This brings us right back to those ridiculous 2008 election cereal boxes. Selling those actually ended up raising roughly $30,000. But honestly, the money wasn't even the most important part. Those boxes accomplished something a polished pitch deck never, ever could. They proved to Paul Graham that this scrappy little team had an unbelievable amount of resourcefulness. It showed that they could survive on absolutely nothing and still find a way forward.
That single, undeniable display of grit was what finally convinced Graham to take a chance on them. So, tracking this timeline, they go from air mattresses in August 2007 to peddling cereal boxes in 2008, straight into Y Combinator's winter 2009 batch with 20 grand in seed funding. And man, that momentum snowballed fast. By April 2009, Sequoia Capital led a $600,000 seed round. The scrappy little company that almost died in the trough of sorrow finally had real, serious capital.
Part 3. Engineering trust. Now that they had the funding, they had to shift gears from survival mode to actual strategy.
They realized something absolutely crucial, that their competitors were totally missing. In a market where strangers are sleeping in strangers' homes, trust isn't just some nice-to-have feature. Trust is the entire product.
So they systematically engineered it right into the platform. First up, they paid for professional photography, which instantly made homes look legitimate instead of like creepy phone snapshots. Next, they built a two-way review system to make sure both guests and hosts were accountable. And finally, they rolled out host guarantees against damage, which completely removed that silent, lingering fear that kept people from actually booking. And here's another brilliant move. Instead of trying to launch absolutely everywhere all at once, they focused entirely on one single market, New York City. They knew they had to win density in one place to prove the marketplace actually felt alive and functioning before they even thought about scaling globally. It's like, solve the one big puzzle right in front of you completely, and then you can move on to the next.
But of course, once they did expand, the reality of the business changed completely. Part 4. The cost of scale.
See, we have to be impartial here and look at what happens when a platform like this grows so massively. The exact same openness that built the company also created some very serious real-world consequences. By opening up millions of homes to millions of strangers, the company was hit with significant litigation under the Fair Housing Act over accusations that the booking system was enabling racial discrimination by hosts. This was a massive, critical issue. It was serious enough that in 2020, they launched Project Lighthouse, a dedicated ongoing initiative to actively measure and root out racial bias directly inside the platform.
Separately, that same platform openness exposed another dark vulnerability: unauthorized party houses. People would book homes under false pretenses just to throw massive, unsanctioned parties. And tragically, this culminated in real violence, including a fatal shooting at a listing in Orinda, California on Halloween in 2019. Confronting this harm head-on, the company was forced to act, imposing a strict, permanent global ban on all parties at its listings.
And on top of all that, the company has spent years locked in these intense regulatory battles with major cities. From New York to New Orleans, there is a constant tug of war over how short-term rentals should even be governed. None of this is just a footnote in their story. It represents the honest, incredibly complex cost of scaling trust between strangers at a global level. Success brings massive responsibilities that simply cannot be ignored.
So, what does this all mean for us? Part 5. The real lesson. Let's look past the air mattresses for a second.
When you look at the financials today, obviously this is a platform used by millions around the world. But what's really fascinating is that the massive venture capital valuation doesn't matter nearly as much as that 30 grand from the cardboard cereal boxes. That tiny, scrappy bit of money is what actually kept the whole thing alive long enough to matter.
So if we distill all this down into the core takeaways from this explainer, here's what we get. First, persistence through repeated rejection is just the price of admission for building something new. Second, when times get incredibly hard, your resourcefulness is way more important than your actual resources. Third, when you are dealing with strangers, trust can never be assumed. It has to be deliberately engineered. And finally, success does not excuse harm. Reaching a massive global scale demands serious ongoing accountability. It's not just an endless victory lap.
None of this huge global enterprise exists today if those founders had just thrown in the towel when the smartest people in the room told them no. Which leaves us with one really powerful question to ask ourselves. What unglamorous, slightly ridiculous work are you willing to do to see your idea through? Are you willing to survive your own trough of sorrow just to find out if your idea actually works? Because sometimes the biggest companies in the world survive on the absolute smallest, scrappiest ideas. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope it sparks a little bit of that resourcefulness in whatever it is you're building next.